the Bengals can still find a way to finish this season above 500 and potentially sneak into the playoffs. Now, Hunter, before that I get into my points, you tell me, are you buying or are you selling?
Okay. I will buy that they can find a way to finish above 500. I'm going to sell
Sold.
that they make the playoffs.
I had a feeling that you were going to go that route. Again, so we're going to cover all the bases. Don't worry. Whether you're a Bengals fan, whether you're hating on what I'm saying, don't worry. This is completely down the middle, just more question anything. Let's get it right into it. So, number one thing I want to point out is, right, as we all know, this is not like this is not a secret, this is not a surprise. Bengals have lost all their first 3 games, but what you might not have considered is that by less than 7 points in each game. It's right against the Patriots, Chiefs, and Commanders. Right. But also, let's call it for what it is. What should concern you if you're a Bengals fan, and what does concern everyone else, is that 2 of those losses are against the Patriots and the Commanders. So, right, that there's a point where inherently that's a bit concerning. But let's move on to the next point. This team, as we know, as much as I would even compare them kind of circa 2014 to 17 to 18 Patriots, where for whatever reason, they would just start out like really slow every year and people would always get to count them out. And then out of nowhere, Tom would get to humming back and you're like, oh yeah, we shouldn't have counted them out. And that's kind of been the story of the Bengals for a very long time now. But to that point, Joe Burrow's not playing bad ball. It's not like Joe Burrow's the reason this team's into that. We're going to get into that in a later point. But to move on to the third point I had here is, look, hold on. Also, I have a caveat I need to add first before we move on to the next point, because I got it in parentheses. I almost missed it. Look, I am aware that the situation, however, is much different than any other team that's come out slow, and the Bengals even starting out slow in the past. Since 1990, 162 teams have opened the season 0-3. You want to take a guess how many? Well, actually, you see it. So, but if you're watching this, you don't know yet. Take a guess in the comments before you finish. Take a pause. Take a guess in the comments how many teams that you think have made it. I'm going to tell you right now. Of those 162 teams, only 4 of them have made it to the postseason, which is a 2.5% out of those 162 teams. So let's move on to the next point here. The next 3 games, but this is where it gets positive if you're a Bengals fan. Don't worry. It's not all negative. Like I said, we're going to cover all the bases. The next 3 games you're away at the Panthers. I know the Panthers just played really good, but it's still the Panthers, and the Bengals, if let me be crystal clear. If they lose this game against the Panthers, it's Jover. In the Joe Burrow, you can change the meme from Biden to Joe Burrow, and you can remake it for Cincinnati. If that's the case, that's what's happening as far as that's concerned. But look, if assuming that they win that game, then you get to play the Ravens at home, and you're 1-3. The fans are back in it. You get to face the Ravens at home with that crowd advantage. They're hungry for that win at home. All right, let's assume that they're 2-3 at that point. And then you get to go away to MetLife to go play the Giants. And again, much like the Panthers, I know the Giants played a good week last week, but this Bengals team should beat the Giants. And I understand the contradictory to what I'm saying, though, is because the Bengals should have also beaten the Patriots and the Commanders. I am fully aware, and yes, we're not discrediting any of that that's already happened. But the point of what I'm trying to say is that, to me, you have a very solid chance as the Bengals to already get back to 500 within the next 3 weeks if everything goes according to plan. So to move on to the next point, and this is the most important thing. Look, Joe Burrow is still playing elite football at this point. There's nobody who's going to take that away from him. We're looking at a 70.9% completion percentage, which if the season ended today, would be the highest completion percentage in the NFL of Joe Burrow's career. 746 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. He has fumbled the ball 3 times, but look, to move on to the final point here, the landscape to me, and this is kind of the biggest thing. This is kind of the caveat that does kind of throw a fork into the machine, or however you'd say it. Look, to me, the landscape of the AFC, it's not really promising for anybody besides the people that are already clear-cut division winners. I mean, I'll pull it up right here. I should have had this tab already open. But look, I mean, if we're looking at just the kind of the landscape of the AFC, right, I am getting ready to say and almost ready to buy in that the Jets are going to be for real. But the sample size we have so far for the Jets, I can't sit here and say for certain, like, yeah, the Jets I'm for sure all in. I'm for sure all in on. We already know the solid situation. So that's one team we're already like, well, how sure are we? With the Chargers, we don't know Justin Herbert's situation. And that really throws kind of a cog, or whatever you want to say. I'm running out of analogies.
Cog in the machine.
But that throws yeah, that messes up. There was rust on the cog in the machine for the Chargers all of a sudden. And look, with the Ravens and Browns, they're 1-2 right now. Right? The Ravens O-line, problem. The Browns O-line and whole situation, problem. And then, right, besides the Texans, right, the Colts, Titans, and Jaguars, like, we're out. Mark Cuban. So I think the biggest thing about the situation is not anything else that I've listed prior to this. It is the fact that you can say pretty sure that the landscape of the AFC is kind of funky this year. And look, if there's any year that someone is going to be the fifth team to be that team to sneak in after starting 0-3, I think you could say this is going to be the year that it's possible, right?
I think my thing, Dobbs, is I understand that the Bengals start slow. But the difference between this year and the last couple years with them, their defense stinks like shit. It is bad. Teams are passing the ball on them at a league low of 42.8%. And it makes sense when you go to the EPA per rush on defense, and they're the fifth worst team in the NFL. And it doesn't get much better when you look at EPA per pass on defense as well, as they are the fourth worst team. Dobbs, if we want to look at points per game allowed, they are allowed the seventh most points, and they are in the company of the Raiders, Jaguars, Commanders, Cowboys, Rams, and Panthers. When you talk about the Cincinnati Bengals, do you expect them to be around any of those teams outside of the Cowboys and the Rams, who are just kind of off to a wonky start?
Absolutely not.
They are tied for seventh in most defensive touchdowns allowed. When we look at quarterback pressures, they are getting to the quarterback. They only got to the quarterback around 9. They only pressured a quarterback about 9 times a game. That is 29th, only in front of the Commanders, the Cardinals, who we know have a dismal defensive line, and the Atlanta Falcons. There is a real problem with this defense, and I think when we look at the pass defense, even though teams are throwing at a league low against them, they allow the second most yards per separation, only in front of the Cardinals. Like, we know the Cardinals defense is really bad. You should not constantly, in multiple statistical categories, be around them. Like, we know for a long time that even when the offense wasn't moving, this defense could win them games. That is not the case this year. That is not the case. And that is the biggest indicator on why I cannot buy that they're going to make the playoffs. Because even if you have a good offense, we know when the AFC teams get rolling how good their offenses can be. So to me, yes, they can finish above 500. They have that pedigree. But to make the playoffs, to me, is becoming a stretch, especially at 0-3. 2.5% of teams do that. I don't buy it.
No, and look, I don't blame you for not buying it because, and again, you're already out, so I don't have to sell it to you. I'm gonna add something in here that makes it even worse because, again, objective guy here. Let's call it for what it is. This is really a big problem at this point if you're a Bengals fan, where at this point, I'm only trying to sell to people in the comments. Let me know what you're thinking. Of course, always leave a comment. Let me know what you're thinking. But this to me is a problem, Hunter. And again, this is where things get really problematic. We go take a look at that Bengals depth chart, and we go check the tape of how Amarius Mims just played. But again, do we expect a rookie tackle to look amazing right off the bat? No, we don't. But when you see how Talise Fuaga has started the year, and we see how Joe Alta started the year, and then we compare it to how Amarius Mims just looked in his first chance getting to not start, but now if he started going forward and essentially, 38 reps, which is a lot of reps. You get what I'm trying to say here. You got to be nervous, not only because that they were not good reps and he has a long way to develop. You have to be nervous knowing that his injury history is what it is. And if you don't know his injury history, Bengals fans or NFL fans will go take a look at Amarius Mims' history. Again, I've always said he's an offensive line coach's dream from a size perspective and all that, but it only matters when you're out there. So, that's not the only thing. I want to tie it into 2 other huge problems. The other huge problem is that your right tackle behind him on the depth chart that was initially 3rd on the depth chart, Deontay Smith, well, he's on the injury reserve right now. And I want you to take a guess, Hunter, how many tackles they have left on the roster besides Amarius Mims and Orlando Brown Jr. that are healthy right now.
1, 0?
Try 0.
Oh. You're going to have to get that swing guard in there. That swing IOL.
Well, and to that point, here's the biggest problem. Take a guess how many other linemen they have that are available across the board at every position.
Probably like 2, 3.
3. We're looking at Cody Ford, Matt Lee, and Jackson Kirkland. I don't know if I'm counting on any of them to be my swing tackle.
What do you mean? Gesicki can line up on the left side. Just put Mims wherever you
Hunter,
want.
It might be trending towards that. I mean, jokes aside, yeah, if we're taking any of them, it's going to be Jackson Kirkland. But you get what I'm saying here. I mean, It's almost like with that information,
I mean,
I'm
it also
almost
doesn't
speechless
help.
with
It
the
also
lack
doesn't
of
help.
preparation
Yeah,
given
I
the
mean,
situation.
they're the 21st graded run block and the 31st rated pass blocking O line. So even when they're healthy or have been good or all good to go, they still stink. So it's like I it just feels like one of those years. Like, okay, yes, the last couple of years we talked about the Bengals. Oh, they start out slow, blah 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 blah. This year feels like a year where it's just kind of like, okay, this shtick has gotten kind of old. Like
Well, it's old.
at this point, it's like a chronic coaching issue.
No, yeah. Well, it is. And that's where look, again, I didn't even I meant to include it on here, but I didn't because again, I wanted to include the positives and negatives as much as possible. My thing is this, and we all know this. There's a point where the Bengals ownership is going to look in the mirror and say, now, given the past and all, because it's not a what you're doing, it's not a what you've done for me, it's what you're doing for me. I don't know. Is Zach Taylor the guy to get this team over the hump? I mean, if you're a Bengals fan, you probably are still leaning towards yes, and I wouldn't
Well,
blame you for that.
I
But
think.
let's remember this.
Go ahead.
Belichick will be available this offseason. There is going to be an amazing coaching cycle this offseason. And if you're not aware of that, get aware of it now because this is going to be not a historic one, but this is going to be an amazing coaching cycle this offseason. So if you're the Bengals, you in the front office, you got to be thinking about that at this point.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing too, and then we can just kind of wrap this up, is that so Adam Hogue, he is a reporter for the Bears. And if you didn't know, the Bears and Bengals had joint practices. And he was just saying like he was very unimpressed like how prepared they were and like how slow they kind of felt. And obviously with the Jamar Chase thing and kind of T. Higgins thing, like the vibes haven't been all that great in Cincinnati. And I think we're kind of seeing that on the field, actually. So, thank you guys so much for watching. If you don't know ball and want to know ball, be sure to subscribe. Let us know in the comments if you think the Bengals will find a way to finish over 500 this year and potentially sneak in the playoffs.